Hey everyone, welcome to Locked In, the channel that brings the best college football intel to the modern fan. We appreciate all of you who've watched our channel and would love for you to become part of the channel by clicking the subscribe button. This will help us become more visible on YouTube and help us achieve our goal of raising football IQs everywhere through in-depth analysis in plain English. Thanks everyone. Stay locked in. All right, gentlemen. We have made it to the final moment, it seems. The national championship game is upon us. Michigan Wolverines, Washington Huskies. Let's take just a few minutes to talk about what each side needs to do, come out victorious in this one, and then let's move on to making our picks. Who wants to start?
I'll start with some keynotes here. I think that Washington's wide receivers, they have three elite level wide receivers, I'd say. They have to beat Michigan's man coverage, first of all. Penix will make the throws. They just have to have an ounce of separation for Penix to place the ball in there. On defense, Washington needs to have their linebackers come up on the run, and if they don't, Michigan will run for 400 yards on them Monday night. And I think that that's the two main key points. If I had to throw in a third, it would be Washington's O line versus Michigan's D line. I think that'll be a really good battle to see. And whoever comes out of that, I think that really affects the game.
What do you think?
I agree with all Chance's points. Throw a little bit, somewhat of a wild card here, because the film that we have seen, for the most part, JJ McCarthy has been on top of his game. But going back and looking at a couple games, and also just talking to another Big Ten fan that watches a lot of Michigan and Ohio State games, there have been times this season that JJ has looked very spotty. You don't know sometimes what you're going to get. Like the Ohio State game, he looked lights out. But there have been other ones in the past that were not quite so impressive. He needs to have a good game. Washington's run defense has been very poor as we looked at least recently. And if they're able to, if they're not able to stop it effectively and they have to stack that box with more guys, then, you look for JJ to have a bigger game if that's what Washington has to do to stop the run, if they can at all. And then it's just about him delivering the ball to his targets. We obviously, in the receiving front, we've already established that Michigan has one guy compared to Washington's three. So I think Michigan needs another receiver to step up. This is all predicated on the idea that Washington does find a way to stop the run. Obviously, they don't. I don't think Washington has much of a chance here if they don't stop it. But if they're able to, look for Michigan to have a number two receiver that really steps up in this game, or maybe the running backs from the backfield. We know that Washington sometimes put themselves in bad situations against matchups with their linebackers versus their running backs, and that goes again to bad linebacker play. But I think both coaching staffs are very good. They obviously are watching way more film going all the way back this season. So they will both be ready to make the adjustments in their weaknesses and attack the other team's weaknesses. But I think overall, JJ needs to have a good game. Washington needs to stop the run, as Chance said. And then I also look for Michigan secondary to have another big game. They had a good game against Ohio State. There were a couple plays here and there that they lost out on, but for the most part, they're okay. And then their other best competition as far as passing quarterbacks go would have been Maryland. Maryland had 247 passing yards, two picks. So not a bad day at all for the pass defense there. But there were a couple of drives where they got exposed a little bit. So they have to stay tight like they have been in the film that we've watched of them, and they got to have a big game because obviously Penix is the best quarterback that they faced all season, bar none, because he's probably the best quarterback in college football this year, other than maybe Jaden Daniels. But overall, they have to have a monster game against a very, very talented quarterback and a very, very talented receiving core. That's the matchup that I'm most excited for. I've been excited for that. The prospect of seeing that Michigan defensive backfield and how they utilize their different coverages and their man with their cover two over top, like how that matches up against Washington's receivers is very appealing. So I mean that'll be my entertainment for the night. And then of course the Washington defense ability to stop the run. If it's there, they have a shot. If it's not, I expect Michigan to roll if Washington can't find a way to stop it.
Yeah, I'll add on to these a couple of maybe different things. I think that still for Michigan, there's a few things on their side that I think has to go right. the What you said about JJ McCarthy, I think is very true. I am not I'm not convinced that he is consistently elite. I think he has it in him to be elite, but I also think that he has a tendency to disappear. And if you think about some of the games, like in particular the Penn State game, uh, he really didn't affect that game that greatly. They ran the ball a lot. And I think that if Michigan gets the chance to run it, that's what they're going to do. So I would like to see McCarthy make a few plays with his feet and hit some receivers down the field to keep drives moving. With that being said, Michigan's offense still, in my opinion, lives and dies by Blake Corum. He is a great running back. He can affect the game in the with his receptions. He can also affect the game heavily with his running ability. So I think that if Corum can rush for over 100 yards, and if he can have two big catches against Washington, I think that the Wolverines probably win. The other thing that I'm looking at for Michigan's offense, Arizona State played just an absolute just deadlock game with Washington significantly earlier this year. And one thing, if you go back and look, and just this will segue into the defense, but one thing the offense had that really worked for them, Washington had a hard time picking up receivers in the top bunch formation. And that's the formation that Michigan absolutely killed Alabama's defense with. And so I look for them to do a lot of the same things that they did against Alabama. So the question then becomes Michigan knows what they're going to do. Washington knows what Michigan is going to do. So can they address the problems that they have? And what I think that Michigan is going to try to do again is to have those three receivers working and find ways to get Corum out as a fourth threat and throw him the football and usually it's going to be an open spot. So Washington's defense is going to have to be really adept at guarding everything out of compressed formations because I think that's what Michigan will likely try to do. On the defensive side, if we think back to that Arizona State game, the thing that Arizona State did that I think a lot of other teams didn't do quite as well, they really affected Corum with the pass rush. And what I've seen Washington's team up against a lot of times is it's the more spread out pass rush that you saw Texas do against them. I'm really interested to see what's going to happen when Michigan brings this really just layered, compressed pass rush that aims to surround the quarterback and give him no room to stand up. Because against Arizona State, Penix threw a very bad, or I'll say a very atypical interception for him in that he got rushed. He was put off of his clock by probably half a second, maybe just a little less, and he rushed to throw out to the about say 12 yards to his right side, right to an Arizona State defender. So a pass rush can change someone who is at his level, even that elite, into just a typical guy in some spots. And I think that if Washington turns the ball over two times against Michigan, I think Michigan wins. So I think that's a real key to the game. Washington needs to protect the ball because I think what their plan has to be, if they can play from ahead, Washington's very comfortable, even with their defense that can be in the at the linebacker level really shaky at times. I think they're comfortable playing ahead, and they want you to hurry up and not run the ball and get into I guess, dicey situations with the passing game. I don't think Michigan's going to get into that game with them. I think Michigan's going to try to dictate the terms of the game with their offense running the ball, with their defense rushing the passer and playing tight pass coverage in the secondary. And I think also the final thing that I think that we haven't mentioned thus far, both of these teams cannot screw around with special teams the way they did in the semifinals. I think that that's going to be a quick way for either side to end up in a hole they can't dig out of. And finally, one thing I see that is kind of a wild card, and it's not even a particular player. I don't think Michigan can come out shaky. I think if Michigan comes out shaky and Washington can score a touchdown, maybe two touchdowns, I think Michigan's going to have a hard time catching up to them. So they're going to have to get over whatever jitters they had early on against Alabama, and they're going to have to come out of the gate playing football. So one more thing before we get to our predictions, we have not mentioned Penix's ability to run the ball, and he picked up 2 or 3 nice runs against Texas. Now I would not go so far as to call them game breakers, but they are definitely drive extenders, and I could see this really hurting Michigan because Jalen Milroe had some opportunities, and now I don't think Penix is nearly the runner Milroe is. I think most would agree with that, if not all. But I do think that opportunity is there because Michigan is focusing on some other things, like the off tackle run can be shaky for them. I think Washington can get them there, but really the run that I think will get them maybe once or twice will be Penix on, say, a little quarterback counter or a jet read keep, and I think that's something they have to look for. Anything else on that front that we thought about?
So I don't see him having a big breakaway 20-yard gainer. That's a backbreaker for Michigan's defense, mainly because of Michigan's DBs and their awareness on what's going on behind them. We broke down multiple plays where even in like while they're in man coverage, they get to a certain spot and they take a peek back at seeing what's going on behind them, whether it's a running back that's gotten out and gotten loose and he's caught a ball or something across the middle underneath that they weren't ready for, or a quarterback running. I think they do a good job of neutralizing long quarterback runs by doing that. And I expect them to be aware that Penix can run the ball because they got that Texas film and they saw Penix run. And there's a couple times this season where he has made teams hurt with his legs. So I expect him to have a couple, good pickups, but I don't think that will be the deciding factor anyway, or I don't think it'll be a backbreaker for Michigan because they do such a good job of rallying to quarterback runs when one breaks off.
Something else I wonder too about that, the very thing that allows them to, they're underneath defenders, that allows them to look back and drift into their deeper zones, is that two safety shell Michigan runs. And so if I'm Washington and this defensive strategy is as obvious as it was to us, it's going to be even more obvious to DeBoer and company. The thing that I wonder about, or I guess I would worry about if it were me, and I'm thinking about adding quarterback runs into the game plan, I do not believe that I want to have Penix running downfield when I have 7 defenders with eyes on him, all of whom know that if you knock out the quarterback, you very likely knock out the offense. So I'm interested to see when Washington runs Penix and what kind of leash that they may have on him, because it could even be that instead of making that 12 or 15-yard gain, he slides whenever he's at around 7 or 8. If he is in danger of being hit, because I think it's a risky proposition. Because I think Washington needs him a lot more than Michigan would need JJ McCarthy, because they have the running game and the defensive pressure to carry that game, even in the absence of a quarterback. I don't think Washington wins this game in the absence of Penix, and those are what I think are the keys to this game. So, do we want to venture any predictions for what's going to happen in the national championship game?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start with that. I think that when it comes to predicting how games will go, you look at who has a wider opportunity range to win this game. And with that being said, I think Michigan does. They can win this game a lot more ways than Washington can. I think that it's a very close game and it looks close on the scoreboard, but I do think Michigan controls the game and they win, I'd say, by 2 touchdowns. And I think they run the ball for over 200 yards against Washington. So that's my official prediction. You got the Wolverines taking it.
So another little add-on with this, I guess, is the close games. Michigan, a lot of games that they play, the scoreboard is close. Not all of them, but there are some this year that they've played close games, even in the semifinal game, where it feels like they're in control for the majority, if not all of it, and yet the other team either seems to have a chance to come back, or the other team it just has it's a close game, and it just doesn't feel like it's been put out of reach, despite Michigan's what sometimes feels like dominance. I feel like in this game, they're going up against another team who's very similar in that way. Washington has found ways to win this year. Both teams have, but Washington has had many many close games. I think they have like 8 one-score wins this year. They might even have more than that. So they are accustomed to playing, cardiac kids. They're accustomed to playing in those very close games that go down to the wire. They played a defensive battle a couple of times, like you mentioned, the Arizona State one. Of that score I think was 15-7 or 15-8. And then you have higher scoring ones that you've seen throughout their schedule, and they're comfortable winning multiple ways, and they're comfortable winning in close games, no matter how that game is played out, whether it's offensively or defensively or a mix of both. So Michigan needs to get away from Washington and don't let them sit around, because compared to the other teams that Michigan has done that with, even though they've had mostly a dominant performance in a lot of their games, they still have let inferior opponents stick around way too late into the game. I don't think you can do that with Washington. I think if Michigan lets Washington hang around, Washington's going to find a way to win, because that's what they've done all season. So just wanted to add that in there before I give my own prediction with it, because this is a matchup of two very different teams, but both teams have won very similarly overall in this season, and both teams are good in close games. I just don't think that Michigan has faced the caliber of opponent in Washington, and Washington's ability to score very, very quickly that can come in back and bite you if you leave them hanging around. That all being said, uh, I just it's really hard for me after watching film to see Washington's defense stop Michigan in multiple ways. I think their DBs will hold up fine against Washington's offensive, pass game and the receivers, but do they have to allocate more defenders into the box to stop the run? If they do, then there are going to be times where Michigan should be able to pick apart Washington's defensive backfield, because it'll be depleted at that point. And I just don't see them being able to stop Michigan's run game without allocating a lot more into the box, having more run support. So I think that matchup goes in the favor of Michigan. And when you're just looking at two teams who can score effectively, but they score differently, Michigan's going to look to control the ball with their run game. Washington's going to look to control the ball with their pass game. But I think that Michigan's defense has the edge over Washington's defense by a good margin to me. And I think they will be able to get enough stops against Washington. Whereas Washington's defense, I don't know if they can stop Michigan enough to hang with them. So if I had to come down to it, barring any, as we always talk about, you can't predict stupidity, you can't predict crazy things that happen within a game, and those are always going to happen. But just from matchups and just looking at teams comprehensively, I would have to go with Michigan here, because I think that they can produce more stops on defense and a similar amount of points on offense, versus Washington, that I just think is going to get burnt a little bit from Washington's defensive side.
I think that I'm going to just echo a lot of what both of y'all were saying. That I believe Michigan comes out on top in this one, but I think it's going to be a really competitive ball game. I think it could, really like both the semifinal games. I think it could come down to the last play. But the one factor that I can't get out of my mind is that if Washington's defense, especially the linebackers, look the same way they looked when they played Texas, who at one time had I think a 9-yard per carry average, maybe in the third quarter, and it ended up being 6.5, I think, per carry. I think Michigan's going to dominate that game, because I don't think they're going to fall into the same trap that Texas did and really start throwing more than they need to. Now, situations can dictate that, and if you fall behind, that changes things. But I believe that the offensive line, Blake Corum, and the Michigan defense, they're going to be able to control this game enough to keep it to where they can run the ball. And like Chance said, if Michigan begins to push that 250-yard plus, I think that it's definitely going to be a Wolverine win. The one thing that I think can really change it is the Washington passing game, because it is impressive. But I think Michigan's going to have enough to really hold their own with them. And I think if they come out from the get-go, and they're playing a good game, they're not, they don't look shaky like they did against Alabama. I think Michigan can control a lot of things with the run game and the play action game that will come out of that, because I think Washington is ultimately going to have to drop down and probably an 8th defender to try to help to maintain their defensive integrity up front against the run. And when that happens, I think that's when Michigan's got a chance to throw the ball. So I'm going to go ahead and pitch my hat into the Michigan ring with y'all. I think it'll be a good game, but I think that you're going to see Michigan come out on top in this one.
With all that being said, I think that'll be it for our prediction video. So stay locked in.
Everyone here at Locked In wants to say thank you to all of you who have subscribed to, liked, and commented on our channel. We've had a blast bringing great college football analysis to you. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button. If you want to share your thoughts, we'd love to see your comments. Till next time, stay locked in.